which is interesting.
Hello, and welcome to a live recording of The Pouch, the podcast. This is episode, what, Jake? 24? This is episode 24?
24.
24. So this is the live recording, and some of this doesn't make it to the podcast, which is more than okay. But essentially, you get to see Jake and I put together the episode ourselves, and it's just a little treat for anyone who decides to drop by. You can leave a comment, and I can bring that up on the screen, which is pretty cool. We can even talk about that, and maybe that might make it onto the show if it's interesting enough. But yeah, so we're going to get into it as soon as I bring up the script.
Ah, good. And by the way, I've just started recording.
Yeah, okay. I will also start recording, which is a good idea.
Do you want to time things? I'll start again.
Okay, yeah, let's time things. I like that. All right. And 3, 2, 1, go. Beautiful. And so I've got that up now, which is fantastic. And if you are watching this via a live recording of a Facebook video, which we will upload later, you can head to thepouchthepodcast.com, where you can find your favorite podcast player of choice. And this episode, I'm also going to be doing a big push on Twitter. I would like to get more Twitter followers, so you can follow us.
How many do we have now?
12.
Fantastic. Well, look, the last drive that we had to push for Twitter users was clearly a resounding success.
Absolutely.
I think we had 7
3,
and we asked for 10.
Yeah, that's right. We pushed past the double digits, which is fantastic. So obviously the next round is really to push
600
for triple digits. That might be a bit much to ask for from this particular episode, but you can find us at The Pouch the Pod 1, or you can search for The Pouch the Podcast. So search for The Pouch the Pod 1 on Twitter, and I'm going to be doing a bit of a Twitter push today because I've been active on Twitter. So that feels good.
Yeah.
Feels good. All right, I think I'm in the drive, El Drivo. So I'm just going to bring up the script, and we'll be good to go. How is your week? How do you feel about this new the new announcements from the Morrison government about coronavirus and the different stages which we're all going to go through to get out the other end of this?
I'm of two minds, Greg.
What's your first mind?
Well, on the one hand, I am a little bit. I have a little bit of trepidation around the premise of going back to the office to work.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of So my wife has Crohn's disease, so we're a little bit cautious about. Oh, that's all right.
My wife also has Crohn's disease.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
No, she does.
It is one of those things that having a partner that's immune suppressed when you're ostensibly quite healthy means that you do have to take certain precautions when approaching some situations. So I'm a little bit cautious about going back to work and exposing the family to the potential of coronavirus. But in the same, I do miss certain routines. I'm really missing my gym. That's the big one, is the ability to just go to the gym, go run on the treadmill for whatever I like, do a class, go do squats. Oh man, I miss squats. I miss squats so much.
You can squat without a gym, right? Like you can do things without having the gym. They're part of phase 2, according to the government's the new rollout. So phase 2.
It was actually the very first thing that I looked for.
Yeah.
But Greg, I went and had a squat rack fabricated so that I could do squats at home.
Right.
That's how much I miss squats, but I can't do them safely at home. Heavy enough. So I do still miss it.
I do squats in my sleep. That's how I've. But anyway.
That's how you keep it solid.
All right, let's get into it. We'll do an introduction for the podcast. So we've got a couple of viewers now. Hello and welcome. We are The Pouch the Podcast. We're doing a bit of a Twitter push today. I may even put it up on the screen. You can search for us at The Pouch the Pod 1. The Pouch the Pod 1, or you can search for The Pouch the Podcast on Twitter. We'd love to get up to 20 followers before the end of this episode. We got 12 at the moment, so 8 followers by the end of this episode.
Sort it out, friends. Sort it out.
All right. Hello and welcome to The Pouch, the neglected Happy Meal toy of podcasts that helps the average Aussie try and make sense of their current political environment. I'm Greg, pretty sure I've forgotten how to drive Savage.
And I'm Jake. I like to wear a surgical mask and gloves when I go shopping so that I can perform surgery on the shopping aisles for Wharton. On today's episode, we talk school bullies, barrels o' laughs, and that's a pun for later, and auditing the auditors.
You're doing the puns wrong. Jake, while we're in the pouch, while we are snug as a bug in a rug in this proverbial pouch, I want to know about this new 3-step situation that the Morrison government revealed today. They did a big reveal, and I got a notification on my phone saying, hey, we've got a bit of a plan for you, and I'd love for you to tell us what that's all about.
Spoiler alert, you can do squats at phase 2.
Yeah, that's good because doing them in my sleep is not getting the results that I want. It's certainly not giving me the results that I was expecting from that Facebook ad. Thank you, Facebook ad.
Get yourself a bed buddy.
All right, now, Jake, is it story 1 that you were saying was the boring one that we want to skip this week? Is that right? Great.
Yep,
okay, good. I'm sure that our single viewer didn't want to watch that anyway. So,
boring.
Okay, we will move on to Dan Tehan. Tehan. Dan Tehan is a school bully. I was bullied in high school. And,
were you?
Yeah. So this is triggering me now at the moment. I think this is how I feel this is my triggered face, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. So I was bullied in school.
It looks not too dissimilar from your happy face. So no. I'm a little bit confused.
Well, that's just because I live in a perpetual state of like your flashbacks.
Of bliss.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, okay. I get you. Yeah, so Dan Tehan has accused Daniel Andrews, Dan Tehan, I should say, is the federal... Dan Tehan is the federal education minister, and he's accused Daniel Andrews, the Victorian premier, of taking a, quote, sledgehammer to the state's education sector as tensions bubbled over between the state and federal governments. So, quote, the question to Daniel Andrews, sure, take a sledgehammer to defeating coronavirus, but why are you taking a sledgehammer also to the state education system?
Yes,
he said earlier this week on the ABC show Insiders.
So what was his point?
He actually said
is he saying that states are holding back? That really they should just be opening up schools? Is that what they're saying? Is that what he's saying?
It is. It absolutely is, and it echoes the I suppose the premier and the chief health. Sorry, the premier, the prime minister, and the chief health officer's calls around preferencing our health system, preferencing our poor children who are invariably missing out on face-to-face education and therefore missing out on a certain amount of quality in their delivery of education. Yeah. So essentially I keep saying essentially, what they're saying there is that you've worked very hard on ensuring that we're not getting too many new cases of coronavirus, which Victoria is. They are still one of the few states that is still having daily new cases of coronavirus.
That's the meatworks, yeah? There was a meatworks that had a bit of an outbreak? Yeah, okay.
And, another part of this story, which we'll get to in a second, which does make this a little bit interesting. But I do want to sort of flesh it out a little bit further because Mr. Tehan, Dan Tehan, also accused Daniel Andrews of a failure of leadership. An hour before Victoria announced the closure of a school due to a coronavirus outbreak.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, I don't like my view on this one is that I don't mind. I think that the state that the federal government's clear. I think Scott Morrison would be tap dancing in his tap dancing shoes if schools went back tomorrow. Like if schools opened up and all the kids flooded in the gates, I think that the federal government would be super happy with that, right? And
but I mean that's an economic. Like they're doing that for economic reasons.
Well, no, I don't think. I think that they're doing that. They're doing that because that's what the medical advice is, that schools are safe to open. And yes, it's a cherry on the top, particularly for the Liberals, I guess, that it's great for the economy, right? But then that's got to filter down to the states, and then the states have to make their individual decisions, and they also have to make political decisions, right? They're the ones who are going to be booted out if it all falls to rubbish. I mean, it's not going to be Scott Morrison isn't going to get the blame if one state makes the wrong decision. The state will get the blame. So I can see the fact that and part of that process is that when a school gets an outbreak, they have a process. They close it down. They do contact tracing. They get everyone out of there. And to their credit, I think all states have done this. The schools open back up in 2 or 3 days, and they're just back to normal. So I'm not one of these people who's sitting around, fanging for a school to close so that I can go, you were right about, I'm right about that, because it's just part of the process and it's going to happen.
I suppose the big thing
Sorry,
here,
I should have done the infliction differently. And it's going to happen.
Different. Yeah, exactly. No, I suppose the...
I got angry then. I think I was angry.
No, it was the good sort of angry, because it's sort of, the argument is basically that... I stopped myself from saying essentially. But
you still gave me one to edit out anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So the argument is, and I suppose the point that Dan Tehan missed here was that while federally the chief health officer is saying schools are okay to open back up, we're fine. We as soon as we can do this, we can get the economy back into its normal rhythm of people can go out. People don't have to stay at home to take care of their kids, therefore they can go to work. And it kickstarts a major part of the economy that has, by necessity, been completely stagnant during the coronavirus thing. But the thing here is there is also a state-based chief health officer, and the advice that the state-based chief health officer was giving is that we need to wait a little bit longer. We need to essentially, there's the national curve that we've been trying to flatten out, and we seem to be aggregate doing that job of flattening that curve. But there's a state-based curve that unfortunately is not looking so curvy. It's looking more pointy at the moment, and we need to address that. So essentially what Dan Tehan was doing is he's saying, listen to my chief health officer. Just because you have another one doesn't mean that you shouldn't be listening to my Victorians. The Prime Minister, in fact, has been saying all along, states and individuals living within those states need to listen to the advice of their state's chief health officer. And what Dan Tehan was saying was essentially disregard your state chief health officer, in direct contradiction of the Prime Minister, and in fact, just listen to me because I'm an education minister, which was, it was a bad strategy essentially. And one of the major questions that David Spears, the host of Insiders, was saying is the new advice to no longer listen to the chief health officer of a state? Is it just to listen, in fact, to, is the advice now to no longer listen to the health experts and instead listen to the productivity experts?
And that is so nuanced, isn't it? Because I love it when the medical experts get on the TV and they say, these are hard decisions to make, and they just and they simply don't envy the people who have to make these decisions. They are nuanced decisions that deserve a lot of attention and fleshing out in, and I'm going to say it, an unprecedented time, right? So everything's unprecedented, and they have to make decisions which are really, really tricky. And so I don't envy the people who have to make those decisions. So the reason that those decisions are tricky about when you open up a school, when to open up, how retail, all that sort of stuff, is because there's going to be some conflicting advice. Like you're going to have a set of people who think that it's great for it to open, and a set of people who have evidence that maybe you shouldn't. I mean, maybe you basically pick and choose your own country at this point, right? Like you want to point out a good thing to do, you point out this country. You want to point out a bad thing to do, you point out this country. And so different things are working for different countries. And look at America. They're opening it up. And it's
they're still
that's right.
While they're still at the very, their curve is still very pointy and it's still going up.
And I'm happy not to go down that path of American politics. But the point, I suppose, is what you're going to have these conflicting points of view. What's good for the goose is not good for the gander anymore. So I'm going to end on that one. That was a good one.
I like it.
All right. So is there anything...
No. I was going to say though, you need to read the title that I've put in there, because I'm hoping that you can totally nail the title as I've read.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So here we go. So
because it was the pun from the beginning.
Yeah. Oh, right. So this is okay. So people will have to rewind back to the beginning of the podcast. Just a quick plug. We're doing a plug for our Twitter feed today. So we have double-digit followers, and we'd like to kick that up a bit. So if you're watching on Facebook, hello, and you can follow us at The Pouch The Pod 1. Or you can search for The Pouch The Podcast, and you'll get taken to our Twitter feed there. We are pretty active on Twitter. That's The Pouch The Pod 1. And I'd love it if we got 2 or 3 followers out of today. That'd be great. We are an Australian news and politics podcast. It's just not so seriously. And I'm Greg Savage, and beside me is my beautiful friend, Jake Farwharton. This is story number 2 for our podcast. John Barilaro is a Barilar of la. Okay, I'm going to do it again. Ready? John Barilaro is a Barilaro laughs.
Yes.
I reckon I can do it better. One more time.
Okay, go.
John Barilaro is a Barilaro laughs.
Yes,
I got a bit Irish
fantastic.
at the end. Okay. John Barilaro
is a Barilaro laughs.
Barilaro laughs.
I love it. That was fantastic.
Is he funny?
It's exactly how I did it.
He's been in the news a lot lately. He was going to be the contender for Eden-Monaro. I'm trying not to read the script
for the Nationals.
For the Nationals.
Yeah.
He was going to be the Nationals contender for Eden-Monaro, and then my watch popped up the other day and said, "No, he's not going to do that anymore."
Well, it was an absolute whirlwind, and I want to take our listeners through this whirlwind of emotions and fun, punches to the face, metaphorically speaking. Yeah. That John Barilaro and his fellow Eden-Monaro seat competitors were going through because of John Barilaro. But to sort of set the scene, if you can picture, John Barilaro is fairly similar in temperament and in rhetoric to Barnaby Joyce.
Right.
he is.
I was wondering what sort of character he was. Like I know, like I love Barnaby.
Yeah. Yeah, well, he's Barnaby, funnily enough, is a Barilar laughs as well.
Yeah.
Barilar laughs. Barilar laughs, exactly. Barnaby Joyce is a former accountant, and John Barilaro is a former financier. Used to run large finance companies, so they come from a similar type of ilk. Almost, but anyway. So the New South Wales ilk, yeah.
I think you said elk.
No,
okay.
I don't think I did.
Carry
I
on.
might have accidentally. But yes, the New South Wales deputy leader and leader of the New South Wales Nationals has had a really interesting week as speculation, conjecture, and wondering. I wanted to, I need a better thesaurus because I got speculation, conjecture. They're great.
Yeah.
Wondering is just boring. Anyway, continues over whether he is in fact the right person for the federal seat of Eden-Monaro after a potentially illegal travel to his farm over the weekend, and someone leaked a series of text messages. I'm trying to be coy here. A series of text messages between John Barilaro and the federal leader of the Nationals, Michael McCormack. Because Michael McCormack refused to support John Barilaro's run for the seat of Eden-Monaro, the leaked text messages to Michael McCormack read, quote, "To feel threatened by me clearly shows you have failed your team and failed as a leader. Quote, you will never be acknowledged by me as our leader. You aren't. You never will be." So, so he's illegally traveled during coronavirus restrictions.
Hang on. He was found not to have illegally traveled to his farm.
Okay.
Yep.
I appreciate that correction because
it was not illegal. He went there. They said that he was there to feed his animals.
Okay. Well, that's good. I'm glad you clarified.
I said that like it was a joke, but it wasn't a joke.
No, I'm glad you clarified.
He went to the farm to feed his animals.
Don't want to be accused of libel. So yes,
no.
He after traveling and being accused of illegally traveling.
That's right.
He had this exchange with the leader of the Nationals, Michael McCormack, and then, essentially he or someone around him leaked those text messages to the press. He, over the weekend, also called his current New South Wales Liberal colleague Andrew Constance the C word for just for having the audacity.
Conservative?
Yes. Yes. That's my kind of C word. For having the audacity to contest the Eden-Monaro seat, which invariably inspired Andrew Constance to immediately leave the race for the seat. Essentially, he picked up the newspaper on Monday, saw that quote, and said, "I'm out."
Yeah, right.
Direct quote. So
is that what happened? So he just dropped out because of all this. Because of
he didn't want to go through the muckraking.
Oh.
Because it's silly stuff. It really is. But
no one wants to go through muckraking deliberately, do they?
Exactly. But after all of that, Barilar dropped out of the race for the seat after all. But
so who's actually in this? Do we know who's actually in this Eden-Monaro situation? Like, I thought that. Unfortunately, I knew like 2 days ago who was in it.
Yeah, well, that's exactly. But no, I wrote down the name of the Labor mayor who is contesting the seat. I can't recall her name.
He resigned. Unfortunately, no, she resigned, and she was going to contest. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so she's going to contest, and by all accounts, she's very, very popular because of her leadership that she showed during the bushfire crisis. Right. She is favoured. Invariably, Labor was favoured, although the last election saw a margin of about 0.9% to Labor. So it will be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what actually occurs here, because you've got essentially the Liberals putting forward a candidate and then that candidate pulling out because of the muckraking, because it got too hot. And then you've got the Nationals who essentially imploded their chance because of, invariably a bit of a firebrand situation. And then you've got the very steady and stable Labor candidate. Unless there is a third party or independent candidate that has some level of popularity, one would think that it's probably likely to go to the most stable person in the field.
Stability in politics, they go together like peas in a pod, don't they? Hey?
Yes.
Yeah, look, it does take a certain type of personality to be there. And we know that the last time we chatted about Eden-Monaro, the seat, we talked about the fact that it's that not only do by-elections considerably favour the incumbent party, if that's the right way to use that word.
Yep.
Incumbent party. They've been Labor for 100 years?
Yeah, I was wrong with that.
Were you? I thought it was. Yeah. No, I thought I heard that too. It was something to do with 100 years anyway. There's fossils.
There's a term for this, but essentially Eden-Monaro is one of the seats that follows, generally speaking, the party that will end up forming government. So when they vote Labor, invariably the Labor government is formed. When they vote Liberal, a Liberal government is formed. It didn't happen in the case of the last election, obviously, with a Labor person being Mike Kelly being elected, and yet invariably Bill Shorten not being able to pull through with a win. But look, again, I've said this a couple of times in relation to this particular case, but it will be interesting to see what actually comes of this, and whether a Liberal or national representative is able to cut through the considerable amounts of muck that they have raked up for those that might follow them.
I do love a good muck raking. Aaron Smith from Townsville in Queensland. He says Monaro seems very driven.
That's a great classic Australian car joke.
Hey, I get the feeling that Mr. Smith is going to be sticking around and trying to figure out how he can put more puns into our show, and I'm more than happy for that.
I'm so happy to endorse his pun making.
He's like in Hey Hey It's Saturday, they had like Dickie Nee would come up and all that sort of stuff, and Darren, you can be that person for us. You can be the person who just pipes up. We'll bring your funny puns up onto our screen here on the Facebook page. page. You are listening to The Pouch, the podcast. We are an Australian news and politics podcast, not so seriously. We were trying to do a bit of a Twitter push today, so if you can follow us at The Pouch, the Pod 1, that would be fantastic. Twitter wouldn't let me have The Pouch, the podcast. Apparently it was too long. So The Pouch, the Pod 1. And you can also search for The Pouch, the podcast, which would be great. And I'm pretty sure Aaron Smith has a Twitter as well. These types of people do, you know.
these pun makers.
They all got Twitter. Jake, Labor wants to check the books. There's no pun there. Did you spend much time on this title? I'm a bit disappointed.
I spent very little time on this. I was just trying to think of a way.
Labor wants to turn the page on books.
Hey, I like it. Labor wants to turn the page on the checking of the book. No, I've never been great with puns.
Labor lacks, federal government lacks spine when it comes to checking books.
Oh, I love it. That was great.
That was a good one.
That was great. Yeah. Use that one.
Yeah.
So yes, Labor has asked.
You think you're so good, Aaron? You think you're so good, Mr. Smith, with your puns?
I love it. So Labor has asked the Auditor General, the Federal Auditor General, to look at the management of Commonwealth debt in a bid to shame the coalition for doubling gross debt since it took office in 2013.
All right, hang on. Now, can we unpack that a little bit? So they asked the Auditor General, right? What does that? Do they have a means to access the Auditor General? Do they write him?
Of course, any parliamentarian can raise a request to perform an audit from the Auditor General at any time.
Right. Okay. So they did that, and they're into the management of Commonwealth debt in a bid to shame the coalition, the National Liberal Party, for doubling gross debt. So, is it to shame them or to bust them doing something? Because they doubled gross debt. Isn't that coronavirus?
Look, it is totally a shaming because if you recall, and we've discussed this a couple of times on the podcast, if you recall, the Liberal National Party is in, sort of the national zeitgeist there, that they are thought of as the good economic managers, the people who invariably make all of the right economic decisions, and people, the Australian public, when they think of good economic managers, they think of the Liberal National Party. And the Liberal National Party have been doing their part to shame Labor over their handling of the 2007 or 2008 global financial crisis. And, invariably, Australia was one of a scant very few countries that did not go into a recession or depression during the global financial crisis, largely because of the way that the Australian government at the time, the Rudd Prime Ministership and the Rudd government, the choices that they made to stimulate the economy and prevent a recession.
That was a good choice.
That
was a very happy day for everyone.
Exactly. We all got our $750 checks. But, invariably, whether they were good choices or bad choices, they made choices at the time, and those choices got Australia through the global financial crisis.
Sure did.
Invariably, there were programs that were I'm going to say rorted. That time has shown that essentially they could have made better decisions at the time. One of those great examples is the pink bat scheme, or the home insulation scheme, which saw poorly regulated insulation installers do a poor job and yet get a lot of money for it, and unfortunately caused the death of a few people. And it saw the beginning and the end of a political career for a great Australian rock legend, Peter Garrett. So it was, look, it is one of those things that the Liberals have shamed, I would say, shamed the Labor Party because of the action that they took in order to stimulate the economy during the global financial crisis, and as a consequence have been able to wear firmly as a badge over their lapels the fact that they are, on the books, they are the good economic managers. However, since 2013, there has been a significant downturn in in our economy.
Right.
They've, and as a consequence, the Reserve Bank of Australia, as we've said several times over the last several months, the Reserve Bank was calling for the Australian government to stimulate the economy.
Yeah.
They were calling for some form of stimulus to get to get our economy going. And then, of course, bushfires and coronavirus hit, and they've had no choice but to do it.
So you think it's a bit of is this a bit of I suppose, a dig at trying?
This is spiteful.
Yeah, at trying to at least put a conversation into the public sphere about, hey, let's just double check this whole presumption that Liberals are, great economic managers here.
Well, look, I think
challenge the stereotype, if you will.
That's exactly what's going to happen here, because essentially the Liberal Party is the Liberal Party is no longer going to get to look down from atop their ivory towers whilst sitting on their high horse that is on their ivory tower. They're no longer going to be able to make the claim that that they are the good economic managers. Invariably, they have managed the economy through what is an unprecedented crisis. However, they have done so in a way that essentially has, put us in a situation of debt for probably a couple of generations.
And I know that there's a lot of people out there who whose opinion is that actually a lot of the decisions that have been made from the government are Anthony Albanese and his party, that it's their ideas. So, there's a lot of news articles out there that sort of point to that fact. And so it's interesting about who gets the credit for all of these decisions, yeah?
Well, and that is part of the process. Essentially,
I know.
Look, why am I even talking?
I didn't know.
No, but invariably, this is part of the process of what do you get to claim as your intellectual property, and what do I get to claim as something that what I want to claim my wins and point out your failures.
It's hard, isn't it? That's so hard. It's similar to this podcast, right? Like, you come up with all the ideas, you do everything behind the scenes, and then I sit here and I take all the credit.
It's a little bit more even than that, Greg.
Similar.
It's exactly the same, but it is invariably one of these.
Is invariably the new essentially, Jake?
I think it is that, and basically, it is one of those situations, though, that you just see play out in so many different ways in so many different countries. Like, if you ever see an opposition party bagging out the party in power, it's generally over a single social issue that that party differs on, or it's over the economy. So the different ways that the different opposition parties around the world bag out the other party, the incumbent party, is invariably it's a fascinating lesson in how to point out the failures of a party that probably would have done exactly the same thing if provided with the same stimulus.
And
so
you could also apply that to your own life, and like, climb your way up the hierarchy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But honestly speaking, had Labor been in power when this situation, when coronavirus had occurred, I don't see too many decisions being made too differently.
No, of course not. But maybe, I don't know. I don't want to speak out of turn. I'm not an economist, and also not all over everything that Labor has said over this either. But I'm getting there. Learning as we go along. You are listening to The Pouch, the podcast, and we are an Australian news and politics podcast. Not so seriously, though. Just take it easy. Relax. It's all okay. Everything's fine. And we're doing a bit of a Twitter push this week. You can follow us at The Pouch, the Pod 1. At The Pouch, the Pod 1. I'm trying to get it to roll off the tongue. Maybe that's my problem.
It doesn't.
No. I should have chosen a different handle. See, I even know what it's called now. At The Pouch Pod 1, you can also search for The Pouch the Podcast on Twitter, on Facebook, and a myriad other things, actually, nowhere else. Instagram, I think. But, yeah. And thank you for watching today on Facebook. If you are watching on Facebook, we're going to get into a segment of the show called Jake's Explainer by Jake. And the song goes, Jake's Explainer by Jake.
But ironically enough, I don't sing it.
No, I sing it. That's the bit. This is the bit.
It was appropriate.
Yeah. Ready? Jake's Explainer by Jake. Jake, And then I changed my voice to make it sound like it's not me. Jake, this week, I want to know. This week, while we're snug as a bug as a rug in the proverbial pouch, I want to know about this new plan that Scott Morrison has laid out. I didn't have time to look at it because I was at work. I was getting notifications on my phone, on my watch, on my iPad, on my iMac, on all the Apple products that I've got. They were all bing, bing, binging along. And I couldn't keep up with it. So I don't know what's happening, and it's Friday night, and I want to know, before I have a Canadian club, big sponsor of the show, what are we going to do?
Huge.
What's happening? I saw the word gyms in there somewhere, but that's all I've got.
Yeah. It is very exciting. So the federal government has they have a 12-step plan, but no, they don't. They've got a 3-step plan. And Prime Minister Scott Morrison walked up to the podium today to unveil his 3-step road back to reopen Australian society and the economy following the coronavirus pandemic.
Is that what it's called, the road back?
No, it's called the 3-step plan.
Less catchy, isn't it?
It is, yeah. No, well, actually,
call us,
Mr.
times. Prime Minister. We've got it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
We would have called it the COVID safe plan.
All right. Yes.
No, we wouldn't have.
No. Anyway, we would have brainstormed a lot. Something about spines. What? Okay, so tell me what's in step 1, Jake. What can I look forward to in step 1, and when does it happen?
Well,
is it happening now?
I suppose no, actually, they made at the very end of the press conference. The Prime Minister wanted to stress that the fact that they have said what the 3 steps are and what they include does not necessarily mean that step 1 will happen today, unless, of course, there is a particular region that will be at that stage. And
that's a big shame because it's Mother's Day this weekend.
It is. Well, actually, speaking of which, many states, with the exception, I suppose the notable exception of Victoria, which is still going through its own, increase in cases at the moment. But, with the notable exception of Victoria, a number of states have increased the number of people that are able to visit a house and the amount of distance that people are allowed to travel around their local area. But before I go into what the steps are, the Prime Minister did stress that the states and territories will determine which of the steps they adopt and when, as they go through those things. But yes, step 1 includes an increase to the number of people allowed in a person's home.
Oh, good.
Up to 10 people.
Yeah, because that's not going to make me feel terrible.
Yes, exactly. And it increases.
Oh, good. I can finally have 10 people over. Fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they've actually said they still. Exactly. Where am I going to put
Who are these people? I have 10 people.
Yeah, I'm going to need a stimulus package to increase the size of my house. If you want me to have 10 people in my house. No, so they've also said you do still need to maintain social distancing while those people are over at your house.
Right. So not only do these people have 10 people over, they've also got a big enough house that each person can have 4 bloody square meters to themselves in this enormous house with all these friends. Who are these people?
I don't think they're talking about you and I, Greg. I don't think they're talking about you and I. But they've also, during that time, they've also, the number of people that are allowed in businesses has increased and in public places. They've allowed the opening of restaurants, cafes, and some shopping centres.
Is this in step 1?
This is in step 1.
Libraries. I can go to a restaurant.
You can go to some restaurants. They're regulating the number of people that are allowed in those restaurants at any given time.
I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I do too. It's always too noisy when you go to a good restaurant. But libraries as well, playgrounds, and boot camps as well, if you want to indulge in a boot camp.
Yeah.
And some local and regional travel has also been allowed.
Oh, where can I go?
Yes, local area.
By plane?
No, not by plane, but you can drive. So you can, there is some state-based and interstate travel, but it's very minimal, and invariably you have to self-quarantine when you land in the new place. Step 2.
Not so bad. Yes. Okay. We're on to step 2. So
this is the important thing.
Hang on. So the states are going to tell me when this is all happening. So Berejiklian for me.
Yep.
You have the other one.
Anastasia Palaszczuk.
You have Anastasia Palaszczuk. So they're going to be the ones to tell us when this is all happening. Right.
Yep.
Okay, so in stage 1, fantasy world, I'm going to a cafe, I'm going to a restaurant, I'm doing squats in the park with my trainer. I've got 10 friends over my goddamn mansion and we're all social distancing, my enormous television, and then all of a sudden, stage 2.
Step 2 happens.
Right.
Yeah. This is the best thing. Jim.
I can't fit you.
Greg.
I can't. Aaron Smith keeps commenting, which is great, and I keep wanting to bring you stuff. I can't. People just need to not go stupid with it. Have already seen big groups. Oh, he's getting serious. Aaron's getting serious. Have already seen big groups of people out and about. Yeah, they do. You're absolutely right, Aaron. They don't need to go stupid about it. Rubbing the fact that they've got more friends than me in my face. Going out with all their friends in big groups of people.
The last thing that any of us want is Dad ScoMo back. Stop it.
But you are right, Aaron. It is a very valid point, and thank you for contributing something of note to the podcast.
Value, absolutely. Yeah. So the big thing about stage 2 is that gyms can finally reopen.
Let's get buff.
Let's get swole
for the winter.
Let's get swole, Greg.
There's
other stuff as well. Cinemas, amusement parks, camping grounds.
Yes.
And there will be some amount of interstate travel allowed, although there's still a large amount of speculation over the amount of quarantine that will be necessary once the person reaches their destination with interstate travel.
Right.
And increasing the number of people allowed in a place to 20.
Just a place.
A place, so a workplace, a house, 20 people
place?
around your place. A safe place. They still have to social distance,
a placemat.
Exactly. A placemat.
Okay, 20. Great. So those people can rub it in my face too. Typical. Bourgeoisie. I don't even know what that is.
Oh, just wait. Just wait until we get to step 3.
Just wait till we get back to normal. Wait. All right. Okay.
200 people.
I'm feeling good. In stage 2. I'm, getting my groove on. What are we doing with schools in stage 2, Jake? Do we know?
Doing your deep squats. So, sorry, say again.
What are we doing with schools in stage 2?
Well, essentially, schools should be enabled by the beginning of stage 1.
Right. Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. Okay. So, essentially, this is all saying schools, can be open now.
Yeah.
Okay.
The federal government really wants schools to go back. I don't know if anyone's got that message.
Well, this is it's that whole thing of as soon as we can get schools back and going, parents don't necessarily need to stay home to take care of their kids, so they can go back to work, etc.
Plus, kids get an education. Not forgetting that bit.
And all, whatever.
Okay,
whatever.
Stage 3, go.
A value, but yes, step 3, all interstate travel is allowed.
No way.
Yeah, and
I can go to
something
Canberra?
that I know that you're looking forward to.
Canberra?
You can go back to Canberra. No, but something that I know that you're looking forward to is nightclubs.
What?
Nightclubs, Greg.
Oh, no, I thought you said knife clubs.
Bit of stabby.
I was like, no, man, that is past. That is behind me. Okay. Nightclubs. Yeah, I'm really sad that nightclubs have been shut.
Me too.
It's just been heart-wrenching, hasn't it?
All of the doofs.
What's your favourite nightclub? What's your favourite thing to do at a nightclub, Jake?
I enjoy dancing,
etc.
Yes.
Okay. So good. Okay, I can go to a nightclub with all my friends.
With all your friends, with 100 friends.
What? That's
100
crazy.
friends you can have in that nightclub. So gatherings will be allowed up to 100 people, and there is also the possibility in step 3 of that premise of the trans-Tasman travel.
That's cool.
Between here and New Zealand,
Yeah.
yes.
Jake, is there a reason we didn't talk about that on this week's podcast?
trans-Tasman travel?
We are now. Is this it?
This is
Maybe
it.
We should go back and record a segment about it. Anyway, so stage 3 is not the be-all and end-all. Stage 3 is not, woohoo, we're all done. Who was the MP this week that decided that the pandemic was over? He got berated.
Ooh,
Did you catch that? Oh, no. So
I
I tried to Google him before, but I couldn't find it. It was an MP, a Liberal MP, said that such and such people can't handle that the pandemic's over. And then he was forced to make a very public apology and saying that it was very irresponsible that he declared the pandemic over. I thought that's good. So the pandemic isn't over even in stage 3. This guy got way ahead of himself.
Yeah, it sounds like he got a big talking to by Dad ScoMo.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, Aaron Smith, who is the person commenting, we always get one person commenting each week. Aaron Smith is it for this week.
Classic one person.
Schools will be interesting next week with Prep 1 and 11-12 starting back to normal next week in Queensland. Yes, I'm glad you qualified that, because the big push for us, obviously, at the podcast is that each state will be having their own thing. So this is for Queensland. Schools will be interesting. Schools are interesting places to begin with, let alone let alone coming back in. So you guys have got the younger grades are coming back, and 11-12. 11-12 makes sense because of HSCs and, I don't know, QCSs, whatever you've got
ATARs.
up there. ATArs.
I think ATAR is the school. I don't know what they do.
Yeah, anyway,
exactly.
The thing that will get you a job, not that you have to do that to get a job, of course. And yeah, but it helps. And so you guys are getting your younger years back and your older years back normal, I presume, means 5 days a week.
Just essentially, it'll be a sequential thing. So essentially, damn it, I did it again.
Don't worry about
what they're hoping to do is to slowly reintegrate people whilst providing enough space for those classes to essentially to spread out. So year 1 is the only part of primary school that's going back this next week.
And prep?
And I don't remember reading prep, but if Aaron said it, I'm gonna choose to believe him.
It's possible. It's possible that he's a school teacher. Who knows?
Year 11 and 12 is going back. Is also going back next Monday. I believe from the following week they're going to start deciding on what grades to reintroduce. But look, it's fun to watch the decisions that are being made, because there's a certain amount of arbitrariness to it. It's, I totally get year 12. It's their senior year. They are missing out on stuff that they require in order to exactly. That makes sense to me. Year 11, there's a level of arbitrariness in there I'm not 100% sold on, particularly when you consider probably how close year 11 and 12s are in terms of age. They probably congregate together. I don't know. But, if they're congregating together, there's there's that transmissibility.
Cool.
Yep. Yes, they're I don't even have a word for it. But anyway, year 1, I don't get. I honestly don't get that one. Yeah. Why not choose grade 6? Considering they're doing grade 12 anyway. So there's a certain amount of arbitrariness associated with this, but I'm sure it just relates to an overall plan that we don't yet have visibility of.
And Jake, I can tell by your infliction that we're done with that conversation. And that's the end. All right. Well, that's cool, man. I'm excited. Okay. I like knowing that the fact that stage 3 isn't the end of it all.
Yep. I'm just super excited for stage 2. Seriously, it's one thing that I really miss is, like I normally do a few martial arts classes a week, as well as I enjoy, doing a boot camp in the gym type of class, socializing with the people there. I miss that stuff. And so I'm definitely excited, much more so than driving into work.
Do you socialize at the gym, do you?
Yeah.
See, I'm very much put my AirPods in, put on Tool.
I do that
zone
too.
Out.
I do that.
That's it. Like, don't talk to me, man. Like, don't talk to me. This is my place.
I really
you
love
in my
doing,
house.
I love doing classes, and particularly, when it's a martial arts type class, it's important to talk to the person that you're sparring with.
Okay, well that's different. All right, yeah, okay.
Remember to duck.
This is Jake. He hates you and he doesn't talk to you, but he'll kick your butt. Now, Jake, thanks so much for chatting with me. We've had such a great week. We chatted with Pete Smisson. We got him on the show. Sorry, we got him on the show.
Yeah, we got here. You're putting interesting emphasis on different syllables, but it was lovely to speak to Pete. As we discussed in the podcast, he and I, roughly speaking, started podcasting at about the same time. The three of us on the Imaginary Friends show all those 100 years ago. And we've been through various changes politically, emotionally, physically, mentally, all of those things.
Nah.
We've grown.
I'm still the same.
Well, some of us.
I just have more money.
I
I just make stupider mistakes.
I love it, but they have bigger consequences now. But no, it was quite interesting. It was wonderful to hear how far he's come and why he's doing what he's doing and how he's doing it. So I think listeners will really enjoy that conversation as much as we did.
Absolutely, super interesting discussion, and I don't know. I've heard some podcasts where they just talk about things they like at the end of the podcast, and I want to do that with you, Jake. Because we were on Pete's podcast the other week and I couldn't sleep afterwards because I was just so chuffed. Chuffed with what happened, And I then stayed up and I watched the Beastie Boys documentary on Apple TV.
Oh, so good.
And I didn't want to watch it, right? I didn't want to watch it because it was all up in my grill. It was all up in my grill in terms of advertising and being everywhere, and I was getting notifications, and I didn't really listen to the Beastie Boys. I knew You Got to Fight for Your Right to Party. That's the only joke I knew. And that's the only song I knew, really. Like, you realize...
Which invariably they hate.
Yeah, well... And it was fascinating, man, wasn't it? Like, if you are looking for something to do, check out the Beastie Boys documentary. If you're not into the Beastie Boys, I think you can still take away from it the fact that like when you work hard and if you have a dream and all that sort of stuff, like just listening to a successful band's story was fascinating. What did you love about it?
It started got a little bit emotional at the beginning because while I didn't necessarily love the Beastie Boys, they were, a part of my sort of mid to late teens and in my 20s. And so I always enjoyed them, but to hear not only that one of the band members I didn't know had died, it was Adam Yao.
2012?
13, I think it was. Something like that.
Some date.
Yeah, it was definitely a date. And but yeah, that they lost him and that they were clearly shaken up about it, and that I didn't know about it, considering it was a band that I did sort of treasure from my youth. Yeah. It was amazing.
And the whole thing is directed by Spike Jonze, right? And which is fascinating in itself. Awesome. But then you've also got the fact that they started off with his death, right? They started off by saying that he can't be here; it's just us two. So he obviously took a bit of that, like what he knew about movies and stuff, right? And sort of put a hook in at the beginning for people exactly like you and me who didn't really know about this death and who didn't know about sort of the trauma that they'd gone through over recent history. But to put that at the beginning and then to sort of know that was coming up towards the end, it was very heartbreaking, and obviously it gets very emotional towards the end as well.
Yeah, but it was so amazing to watch sort of their creative process. I'm always fascinated by creative people and how they sort of come to create a thing. And their process was really interesting because it was repetitive. They pretty well did the same sort of thing every single time that they came into the development of a new song or a new album or whatever. I won't sort of give it away for two reasons. Number one, I can't remember it, and number two, I don't want to give away the.
Well, they talked about their own changes. They talked about the fact that and I know one of the descriptions for their album says, this is one of the first times they didn't try and reinvent themselves. It's such a fascinating story. Anyway, check that out if you got time, Jake. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me this week, not only on our podcast, but on Pete Smithson's podcast as well, the Aussie English podcast. And when our listeners have finished now singing along with the Beastie Boys, You Got to Fight for Your Right to Party, because that's stuck in their head, what would you like them to do?
3 things, Greg.
Wow.
Right?
You got a 3-step program.
It's a 3-step plan.
Okay.
It's a 3-step plan to get us back to awesomeness.
1, rate.
Rate, review, subscribe.
Oh, in that order.
in that order. I realize that 2 of those are a little bit redundant because they're the same thing.
Doesn't matter.
But do it twice.
Don't tell anyone. Don't
do it on different platforms. Do it once on Spotify and once on Apple Podcasts.
And if you'd like to share the love, you can tell your friends and families and foes to head to thepouchofthepodcast.com, where they can choose their favorite podcast player of choice. We have updated our logo on that website as well if you want to check it out. I don't know why you'd want to do that. But anyway, maybe while you're in the boring bit during the Beastie Boys one, you want to check out thepouchpodcast.com. And also follow us on Twitter at thepouchthepod1. Or search for The Pouch Podcast on Twitter.
Yeah.
Peace and love, Jake.
Peace and love to you too. Pressing stop.
Whew.
Wow, I'm exhausted.
All right, hang on. Still don't swear because we're still on Facebook. Don't say anything that's gonna